You know, it's bad news, dumb shit. When I'm full of rep and be full of red rum, bitch.
Welcome to that wreck. You already know it's your host PayDae, and everybody loves PayDae like the first and the 15th. Y'all know I always come through and slide through and push y'all in that wreck business. And today ain't no different because NBA Youngboy is from that wreck. So let's get into what's going on with him right now. But before we do that, make sure y'all show some love to my like button. And if you're not already subscribed, you can go ahead and subscribe now, or you can wait till this video ends. And if you enjoyed it, subscribe then. Either way is fine with me, but let's get it done. But we will be discussing NBA Youngboy pleading guilty and him being sentenced. So let's get into it. NBA Youngboy pleaded guilty Monday in a Utah courtroom to multiple counts for running a prescription drug fraud ring out of his home in Huntsville, Utah. He also pled no contest to other counts. We will get to the details of which ones he pled no contest to and the ones he pled guilty to.
Yes, Your Honor. It is anticipated that my client will be entering guilty pleas to counts 2 through 7. Count 13, count 16, count 19, and count 22.
In exchange for the plea deal, his 4 felony charges were reduced to misdemeanors. He will not serve prison time for the charges, but was ordered to pay a $25,000 fine.
Your Honor, it's anticipated that he will enter those pleas as charged. In other words, identity fraud as a third-degree felony with 2 counts, forgery as a third-degree felony, 2 counts, 6 counts of pharmacy fraud, which would be those count 4.
And that's a Class A misdemeanor.
And those are all Class A misdemeanors. There are 6 of those. And all of those the counts I just recited the ends are all the pharmacy fraud cases. We are asking the court to waive time for sentencing. I have some specific requests as it relates to sentencing about the language, but the agreement is that my client will pay a $25,000 fine to the court. And Your Honor, I have a cashier's check in hand. I'm holding it now that I would like to publish to the court at the end of this. Upon payment of that, the state has agreed to a 402 reduction for each of those 4 felony counts. They would all be reduced to Class A misdemeanors, and the case would close at that point in time.
Investigators believe NBA Youngboy and others were involved in a scheme to fraudulently obtain the prescription drugs promethazine and codeine from pharmacies in Utah, pretending to be real doctors in the area. The scheme drew suspicion because the people calling in prescriptions were clearly using fake voices and had Southern accents.
For the 10 charges he's pleading to, Your Honor, the defendant is ultimately criminally responsible, particularly under Utah Code 76-202, for a large-scale prescription drug fraud ring that has been known to have acquired various prescription medications, specifically promethazine with codeine, which is a cough suppressant that's heavily abused Schedule 5 controlled substance in the state of Utah. And those were secured from multiple pharmacies in Cache County, as well as other pharmacies in northern Utah. Mr. Galden had acted with others in this criminal activity, particularly where there were 2 co-defendants, which were recently had their cases resolved before this court. And those co-defendants were intercepted as they were trying to pick up the fraudulent prescription at Larry's Pharmacy in Smithfield here in Cache County. Those 2 individuals were using Mr. Galden's vehicle to make the pickup, and they were detained by law enforcement. And shortly thereafter, someone contacted law enforcement, pretending to be an elderly woman to whom the fraudulent prescription belonged. The prescription was listed to be for a Gwendolyn Cox, but this elderly woman, who was clearly someone pretending to be an elderly woman, said her name was Gwendolyn White and couldn't provide a birth year. This is important because fraudulent names such as Beatrice White, Bethel White, Carolyn White, Harriet White, Anna White, and Gwendolyn White were all being used through this scheme. There were two other pharmacists here in Cache County that immediately recognized this fake elderly woman's voice from that phone call as the same person who had called into their pharmacies checking in on a prescription under some of those aforementioned names for promethazine with codeine. And all of these prescriptions had been called in by someone portraying themselves to be a Dr. James Woodmansey, who is a legitimate doctor in the Provo, Utah area, but he was contacted by law enforcement and by several of these other prescription outlets, and he had verified that these were all fraudulent prescriptions that he had not authorized. Ultimately, Mr. Galden ended up in contact with the detective investigating this case when he was trying to get his vehicle out of impound after it was taken from the Larry's Pharmacy incident. During that phone call, Mr. Galden had engaged in a conversation with a third person and had asked him about the prescription they picked up. At that time, it became clear that Mr. Galden had some involvement beyond simply lending his vehicle to be used, where he had some knowledge of the fraudulent prescription being retrieved. In addition, there was one prescription called in for Control Galden, but the date of birth for that prescription was in 1953, which was clearly a false date of birth and is consistent with some of those date of births used with the false elderly women names throughout this fraudulent scheme. That prescription was picked up by an individual who was intercepted by law enforcement. Shortly thereafter, promethazine with codeine, along with other prescriptions, had been called in to that same pharmacy for Mr. Galden, utilizing his accurate date of birth. Mr. Galden, however, while he was on a federal probation, was only afforded a single doctor to issue prescriptions with a single pharmacy, and the doctor who called that prescription in was inconsistent, and that pharmacy was inconsistent with those which had been allowed through probation. In the end, there was a search warrant executed on Mr. Galden's residence. Law enforcement found a prescription bottle in Mr. Galden's bathroom inside the master bedroom. The bottle was for a Caroline White, one of the known fraudulent names, with the corresponding prescribing doctor who had confirmed the fraud. The prescription was for doxycycline, and the prescription bottle was consistent with the time frame and patient information for the promethazine with codeine that had also been picked up, according to a subsequently gathered Doppel report. Also in the bathroom was a prescription for doxycycline to Control Galden, also prescribed by the same doctor and the previously confirmed as fraud. This is consistent with the promethazine with codeine that had been prescribed with Control's fake date of birth, and a prescription bottle of promethazine with codeine was also found inside the defendant's bathroom with no prescription label on the bottle. And a further search of the defendant's residence yielded 3 more bottles of promethazine with codeine. More specifically to these counts, Your Honor, on September 19th of 2023, Reed's Pharmacy in Hiram received a prescription called in for a Bethel White with a claimed date of birth of November 10th of 1949. On September 19th, 2023, Spence's Pharmacy received a similar phone call for a Gwendolyn Cox with a fraudulent date of birth. On October 9th, 2023, Spence's Pharmacy received such a phone call with a fraudulent name. Cache Valley Pharmacy in North Logan had a prescription called in for a fraudulent individual. And on January 17th, 2024, Larry's Pharmacy in Smithfield received a call also from a fraudulent individual. Cook's Brothers Pharmacy in Providence in Cache County had a fraudulent prescription called in, and the Budge Clinic Pharmacy in Logan also had a fraudulent prescription called in. So ultimately, for each time a prescription was called in, there were 3 separate offenses: identity fraud, attempting to procure a prescription, and forgery. The identity fraud includes the use of a real physician's identifying information, that of Dr. James Woodmansey. The procurement of a prescription includes having other people procure or attempt to procure the prescriptions through deceit and lying about their relationship to the patient. And the forgery includes the act of authenticating the writing or the prescription in each instance, which purports to be the act of that Dr. James Woodmansey.
All right, thank you, Mr. Keller. That is a sufficient factual basis to support each of these 10 charges. Mr. Galden, to the charge of identity fraud, a 3rd-degree felony, 2 separate counts, how do you plead to both of those charges? Guilty, not guilty, or no contest?
No contest.
To the charge of forgery, a third-degree felony, 2 separate counts, both of those being third-degree felonies. How do you plead to those 2 charges?
No contest.
To the charge of pharmacy fraud, a Class A misdemeanor, 6 separate counts. How do you plead to each 6 of those charges?
No contest.
The court finds that you have knowingly and voluntarily entered your no contest pleas. I've signed the statement of defendant and will now enter that into the record. You have the right to be sentenced in not less than 2 days and not more than 45 days. It's my understanding that you would like to waive time for sentencing and be sentenced today. Is that correct, Mr. Golden?
Yes.
Okay.
NBA Youngboy still faces potentially more severe penalties for federal gun charges out of Baton Rouge. Police said they found more than a dozen guns at the scene of a rap video shoot on Chippewa Street in 2020, and NBA Youngboy was charged with a federal felon in possession of a firearm. As part of a plea deal, Youngboy avoided state prison but is facing 27 months in federal prison, followed by 5 years of probation.
With credit for time served?
No credit for time served, and that has to do with his pending federal sentencing and an anticipated sentence within the Bureau of Prisons. So what we're asking is for the court to give no credit for any time served and to simply close the case.
Okay. And as part of that federal probationary period, would Mr. Golden be required to, I assume he would be subject to probation searches that would involve ensuring that he is not possessing or using any dangerous weapons, such as firearms, likewise, no illegal drugs or alcohol, things of that nature?
That's correct, Your Honor. And federal probation is a sort of unique animal in the sense that it's akin to probationary terms in state, which is to say that they could impose the entire sentence that was initially available to impose if there were to be a violation. But he would have federal probation officers for that period of time.
And Your Honor, I would just add to that too, built within the federal code is any violation of probation that includes possession of a controlled substance requires automatic revocation of the term of probation. So there is a lot riding on our client doing well after the Bureau of Prison time and then for 5 years on probation.
Very well.
Initially charged with a total of 46 counts, this plea reduced his charges significantly. The judge did have some words for NBA Youngboy. He said,
Mr. Golden, I've seen so many times that good men and women who have a lot of talent and potential, that they can be robbed of that potential when they start to really struggle with their addiction. So I don't want that for you. You seem like a very talented young man. I'm hoping in your future that once you're done with your federal prison time, that you can be really successful on federal probation and have a really bright future where you can reach your full potential in every aspect of your life. Best of luck to you, Mr. Golden.
Thank you.
no lie, I wasn't holding out a lot of hope for this case. Because it was so many counts, because it was federal, I thought it would have been way worse than it actually is. But congratulations to him. I'm glad nonetheless that it's not. Feel free to drop in the comment section and tell me y'all feelings about it, and y'all thoughts. Don't forget to hit the like button if you didn't already do so. I'll catch you guys later. That concludes this video.